Again, just let me say thank you to everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate your time, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about Communities of Excellence 2026 today. So we are going to get started, and my name is Stephanie Norling. I am the Executive Director of Communities of Excellence 2026, and I will be leading this 1-hour webinar with you all today. I do have some special guests that will be helping me with this presentation. And so thank you in advance to Manuel, Crystal, and Kim for joining us. They, all three of them are part of our National Learning Collaborative as participants, as faculty, as mentors, as guest presenters because of their experience. And so I encourage you to ask them questions throughout this webinar. Later on, each of them will briefly talk about their own experiences with Communities of Excellence. And so you'll get a chance to hear from them and then ask questions then as well. We're going to start out today with a brief background on Communities of Excellence 2026 and the Baldrige-based Communities of Excellence framework. I'll then go into detail about our National Learning Collaborative, which is how we support communities to adopt the Communities of Excellence framework and begin their community excellence journeys. Then I will provide some of the details on how to join our 5th cohort, which begins in October of 2021. And to finish, we'll hear from each of our 3 panelists. Hopefully this will leave plenty of time for your questions. And in addition to allowing time at the end, I will stop at each of these points to see if you have questions and to check the chat box. And also give our panelists time to add anything that they'd like to my comments. So with that, we are going to go ahead and get started. Now, something you might note, this is a Zoom meeting, it's not a webinar, so I appreciate that you all have kept your audio muted, but no, we can see your video if you choose to, so which is great because we want this to be interactive. We want to encourage you to ask questions, but I just want to make sure you do that. Okay, so let's get started. We are a nonprofit organization. We were formed in 2013 by 2 former healthcare CEOs whose organizations, Premier and Heartland Health, received the National Baldrige Quality Award in the 2000s. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for our nation's residents by assisting communities in implementing the Baldrige-based Communities of Excellence framework. I'd like to continue this introduction with our foundation statement that for America to sustain its vitality, promote opportunity, and create a more equitable society during its second 250 years of existence, we must improve the performance of communities and the people who lead and live in them. The year 2026 is the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding, which is why we call our organization Communities of Excellence 2026. That is our stake in the ground, that by 2026, we will successfully adapt it and refine this framework and set a course of action among communities across the United States to embrace the framework and begin their journeys to achieve and sustain excellence. Federal and state policy is important, but we believe that the kind of meaningful change we need in this country best occurs community by community. Improving our communities requires investments of all kinds, and there's no shortage of investments by public and private entities, or shortage of initiatives that exist to address our problems, or tools for collaboration and community leadership, or for data collection, or for decision-making. But what we can observe is that despite all of this critical and important work, we simply aren't making the kind of progress that we need to enable all of our residents in this country to thrive. And we believe that one of the missing pieces is that there is no systematic approach familiar to and used by all entities within communities that ensures that federal, state, local, and private sector efforts are aligned and integrated to maximize their benefit and impact. We also continue to see examples of well-meaning, successful projects that get funded, but when funding runs out, these programs are unable to continue. So not only do we need to maximize the results of our current efforts, but we need to ensure that those results and those successful efforts can be sustained by individuals within those communities for years to come. Both of our co-founders knew the power of the Baldrige framework to transform their organizations and produce sustainable results. And building off of that, developed this belief that the Baldrige framework, which we know drives performance excellence in businesses and organizations, could be adapted to drive performance excellence in communities and drive the kind of system-wide change that we need. So some history on Baldrige and why we believe that the Baldrige framework holds the potential to change the way that we do things in communities. So a little history first, why this is such a big deal. Baldrige was founded in 1987. This is Malcolm Baldrige. He was then the Secretary of Commerce under Ronald Reagan. And its purpose was to improve US quality, productivity, and competitiveness in response to a manufacturing crisis quality crisis that we were having in the 1980s. Today, the Baldrige framework is used by thousands of organizations of all types and sizes across the country. It's a public-private partnership managed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is an agency of the Department of Commerce. Its scope is huge. Actually, this number is, I think, larger now. I haven't updated. It's about 135 national awards have been given since 1987. 30 plus state and regional programs use the Baldrige framework and support performance excellence, administering over 2,000 awards per year. And there are 80 national programs around the world modeled after Baldrige. So it is truly an international standard of performance excellence. The program has three purposes. One, to improve US quality, productivity, and competitiveness, which we've discussed. Two, establish a nationally recognized standard of organizational and soon community excellence and quality performance. And three, establish role models of that standard, the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. So Baldrige looks at all parts of your organization and manages them as a unified whole. One of the reasons it's important, it identifies strengths and improvements using an integrated systems approach. Baldrige helps facilitate improvement, innovation, alignment, and integration, assists in value to customers, facilitates organizational personal learning, monitors progress over time, and we know it works. We know it works in organizations. It's applicable to organizations of any size, any complexity, focuses on benchmarking excellence, evidence-based decision-making. And the point here is not just to improve, but to pursue excellence, to be the best that you can be. And adopting Baldrige in organization, as I said, works. It improves outcomes, optimizes resources, and aligns activities. And this is why we believe that this is the right model for communities. So again, we want communities to be the best they can be, and Baldrige's framework, adapted in communities, can help do this. We've talked about how this is a systems perspective, providing equal emphasis on focus and how different parts of a system impact and link with the others. It focuses on optimizing the entire system versus focusing on pockets of excellence, or in this case, versus focusing on maybe individual sectors in a community, and instead is looking at the community as a whole. This is a particularly important consideration, given that sometimes what looks like good solutions or good tools in one sector or one part of the community sometimes can have unintended consequences and push the problem somewhere else. And similar to an organization, well, in any given communities, you might find pockets of excellence, individual sectors that are high performing. Unless all of them are and they're working together, you're not going to have the best results and move the needle on these huge issues. In addition, most, if not all, of the tools and resources for communities focus on a single issue, perhaps a single sector, or in one or a few of the components of the system more than the rest. And so Baldrige and Communities of Excellence really help you determine which of these tools are going to benefit your community the most and when. They help your leaders choose what is the most suitable and effective to deploy in making improvements and moving towards excellence in your community. So as I mentioned before, it's a very powerful set of questions. It's about asking the right questions. And so many of these bullets here you see are kind of repeats of how this delivers value in communities. But what I really want to point out is this graphic at the bottom, where I think a lot of us can relate to being kind of more on the reactive side. There's a lot of really important, really good work in our communities. They're not always aligned and not always kind of integrated like they could be. We all have goals for the community, but maybe they're not quite as clearly defined. And one of the values of the Communities of Excellence framework is just really helping you start getting these arrows moving in the same direction, united under shared goals, taking part in shared community activities, until you move to the right and you truly have an integrated community set of systems working together, aligned and focused on the goals for what your community needs. So a systems approach to changing communities involves seeing, believing, and acting. And I really like this graphic because I think it's a very simple but powerful way of kind of communicating the value of communities of excellence and taking on this journey. And it starts with knowing the current story, knowing your community's story, and looking at the elements, the interconnections, and the wider purposes of the systems that exist within your community. The framework helps your community assess your performance, your leadership, and the areas that are most in need of measurable improvement and innovation, with a particular focus on education, health, and safety, quality of life, and employment. Then you move to envisioning a future story. This is about understanding and trusting the data to guide decision-making and determining a shared vision and priorities. The framework guides dynamic dialogue through a common language that harnesses the best of communities' collective past, reflects the people today, and responsibly pursues the opportunities for improving tomorrow. And then finally, doing, which is why we're all here, taking action to create a new story for our communities, investing the time and resources to learn and shift habits that are, when combined, the continuously improving system of how things are done around here in communities. The framework supports community residents and their leaders in developing and empowering their skills, knowledge, and leadership, so that continuous improvement becomes internalized, sustainable, and ingrained in the community's culture. And so, to summarize, why adopt this framework? It can help you in your community, the leaders across your community in different sectors, in different organizations, unite leadership at all levels towards shared goals. Align the efforts in different sectors of your community so they work together in a unified, mutually beneficial manner. Manage all the parts of your community as a unified whole to achieve your mission, and assure that your plans, processes, measures, and actions are consistent. And the way that we support you, we help communities and organizations within align those goals and maximize win-win opportunities while still respecting each other's individual interests. We empower leaders to excel, and our roadmap for this journey is the Communities of Excellence framework. So I want to pause there and see if there's any questions or any comments from our esteemed panelists. Any questions or comments? Did I cover everything? Okay, wonderful. I don't see any questions, so we will keep moving. And please, by all means, if you have questions, put them in the chat box and we will get to them as we go. So the next session that we're going to move into is just how the National Learning Collaborative works and information about joining our next cohort of communities that all go through this experience together. First here, I'd like to share our National Learning Collaborative model. This gives you an idea of the 3-year engagement. And although that does not mean that after 3 years, your work is over, but that's really the time that we spend with you to support this. And then we do have continuing opportunities in an alumni group and other ways that we make sure that the connections you make with your communities, with the other communities in the Learning Collaborative continue and sustain. This is a long-term journey. And our goal is to equip you with the knowledge and skills to continue using this framework and improving outcomes in your community over the long term. So year 1 is all about learning, both learning about the framework and learning about your community, learning about how you as leaders work together across sectors, across generations, how you're going to come together, agree on your shared mission and vision for a future, develop a common language, guiding principles of how you will lead and act together. And I think, as we all know, change happens at the speed of trust, and building trust takes time. So year 1 is a very foundational year, and it's really critical to the work that you will do in the future. The focus of year one is what you see at the top here of this visual. This is the Baldrige framework adapted to communities. So the categories, the integrated categories of leadership, strategy, voice of your residents, your workforce in the case of the communities, or your people resources who do the work, operations, measurement, and results. These are those critical components of performance that need to be aligned. But to really be able to get to answer these questions of how you lead and how you set strategy and how you support your residents, you have to first know kind of your current story, know who you are and where you're at. And that's the really important focus of year one. And so the first year, when I talked about the community profile, it's really your opportunity to define your community and what's important to you, and to help all the different leaders in different sectors and individuals and residents and volunteers agree on that and agree on a common language and a shared vision and a common understanding of your community. And then it's also your opportunity to envision your future story and start talking about what future can we create working together. So the objectives in year one: to build and engage your community excellence group. And that's the group of leaders and individuals, formal and informal, volunteer, all those types of individuals that want to participate in this journey with you together. That's what we call your community excellence group. It's to develop your first Baldrige-based community profile and then understand its relationship to the rest of the categories of the framework, which are really going to drive your performance. And then use that information to identify your next steps and begin taking action, as you see in the graphic, to create your new story. So some of the elements of the community profile, briefly, just to give you a sense of what the first year looks like. These are the three main components of the profile. And the first section, the community environment, is really about defining the area. You really need to know what's the geographical area that you're going to serve. It sometimes might seem simple, but it's not always that simple of a question. And so making sure that you're very clear on that. Understanding the complex systems that exist within that area, the key offerings, who's receiving them, the people that are providing those resources, delivering those offerings. And then in the second section here, as I talked about the community excellence group, we focus on defining why you formed this group, your navigating statements, how you're going to work together, lead together, your structure, who else needs to be involved, and how are you going to engage them? And understanding why, those drivers of why are people involved here? Why do they want to engage in this work? And then finally, the third part, which I think is one of my favorites, it's your competitive environment and strategic context. So looking kind of strategically at your community's situation, how well you're doing compared to other communities, any significant changes that could be happening, your strategic challenges, and what you're good at, your core competencies. So these are all really, really important questions. They set a critical foundation to the work that you'll be doing moving forward, and are really the key pieces of information that you will need to make those decisions and be able to ask the right questions, and then answer the questions as you move through the framework. So then looking at years 2 and 3, you see that with that information in hand, you're then able to use that information to engage others, to plan for your collaborative strategic actions, and then implement those. And then in year 3, again, to help encourage sustainability and really, I think, kind of make a foundation of continuous improvement. We focus on kind of analyzing your work to date, understanding continuous improvement, and then help make sure you have the systems and structures in place to be able to accelerate your work and continue on through the years. So this is one of my last slides. I have a few more, but in terms of this section, because one thing I want to just make clear is that communities take this on at different paces. Every community's journey and roadmap looks a little bit different, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. The value of the National Learning Collaborative is being able to go on this journey with 5 to 6 other communities, and then in your own cohort, but then also have the benefit of learning different approaches and successes and things that didn't work from other communities and other cohorts. And there's no single community, like no two communities that have done this in the same way, because we're all different. Each of our communities has different strengths. We have different priorities. The individuals involved in your community excellence group might have different skills. And so, you might have strengths in measurement, data literacy, and another community might have a lot of strengths in strategic planning. And so different pieces move at different levels. And I just really wanted to emphasize that, because there is no wrong way to do this. It's all about what you need to do to improve your community's performance. And that, like we said, that happens at the speed of trust of the individuals that you have involved. So I have a couple more. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions in the chat box? I see there might be a couple.
Yeah, so Stephanie, we have a question in the chat box about cost, and I wasn't sure if you were going to cover that. Okay, perfect.
Just about to get there. Actually, and good news is I'm just about to turn this over to you guys too. So I just have a couple. I'm going to basically go into getting started. Are there more questions?
Yeah, and Stephanie, we have one more question from Christy, who says she has a question. So Christy, we'll invite you to go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in if you'd like. Or certainly feel free to use the chat box as well.
Okay, well, I'll continue, and then hopefully,
let's see. Oh, yep, Christy, go ahead, and then Stephanie, we've got another couple questions coming in on the chat box as well.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't see the box on the screen to unmute myself. So I wanted to ask, how have the panelists approached this? Have they worked on their own organizational profile to identify what their opportunities are and to kind of set a plan in place? Or have they done it without the initial kind of profile and assessment phase and just tried to work it in parallel with community partners? Does that make sense?
So.
Hi, this is Manuel. I can just chime in here. We've had a leadership team or a community excellence group in the community for some time, and had partners working together that were used to that. We immediately saw the value of this framework, and we just began with the community profile, asking ourselves that question. And at first, we began doing that with all the partners. That's about 40 to 50 people at the table. We noticed that wasn't as efficient, and we created a subgroup. At the time, we called it an ad hoc group. It's now the advisory group. It's kind of like a steering committee. There's about 10 members in that group, and they have other responsibilities and roles, but they also look at the framework, come up with the best answers, and then we present that to the larger group, the entire leadership team, to weigh in, provide input, and make those decisions. So that has been our approach.
Something, if I could add to that this sparked me to think about, is that it's really important that communities don't feel like you have to stop what you're doing, or if your coalition or your leadership group or other efforts you're doing, those don't stop. This almost like merges, if you're thinking about a freeway, it kind of merges in with what you're doing. And so by no means is this something that replaces current efforts. It's a way to assess them and then understand kind of where you can get even more value and improve what you're doing. So it really does kind of become your underlying management model, not something new. That's really important to us too, that we don't expect anything to stop.
Yeah, this is Crystal with Northwest Missouri, and I would, in just response to this question, say that we've seen it happen both ways, honestly, right? So we're covering an 18 county territory or region here in this particular effort, but we have smaller communities and counties who are engaged, and some of them already have a collaborative group who are already together, much as Manuel said, and they're able to apply it. But we also, just as a regional effort, do not have one specific sort of regional entity, if you will, to apply the community profile to. So it's happening in smaller iterative stages as we pull more and more people together, if that helps at all.
Thanks, Crystal.
Yeah. And just to add that, if I can, one of the things that I think have been really important for our community. So we're a community that almost started from the ground up and kind of building this collaborative. And so for us, that assessment kind of period and writing the profile in that first year has been foundational to our success. So we really were able to use that opportunity to learn about ourselves as a community, and to learn about ourselves in different perspectives, right? Because we all come to the table with our own organizational identities and backgrounds, but really coming to the table and just having that collective conversation about what our strengths were as a community, our core competencies, what our challenges were. So trying to figure out how to, to leverage our strengths, but also, being really aware of those challenges, and then use that to formulate a strategic plan together going forward. So that first year and that work has been really important to our success in Excelsior Springs.
All right. Thank you. And I see a lot of really good questions coming in, and I'm going to just breeze through this last section, and then we will have plenty of time to get to those too, because I think some of them will be answered in your discussions as well. So thank you for your questions, and then thank you to our panelists for sharing so far. So very quickly, just some things I want to clarify in terms of how to get started and some of the logistics, and then the rest of the time we'll spend on discussion. The first question is, how do we define community? And so what I just want to make clear is there's, if you think about Baldrige, if those of you are familiar, there's no direct parallel in the Baldrige framework in terms of this. And it's essentially the geographic region that's covered by your responses in your community profile. It can range from a town, a city, a county, a group of counties, or any combination. And frankly, we have all of those involved in communities of excellence. On the left here, you see San Diego South region, and this is about 1/6 of the county of San Diego. It has a very distinctive identity, which is another important part of kind of defining your community. And that's one example. We also have the 18 counties of Northwest Missouri that includes rural areas, micropolitans, regional trade areas. And there are certain things that are done regionally in this area and certain things that are done locally. And then on the right, we have West Kendall, Florida, which is unincorporated part of Miami-Dade County. And their definition of kind of their community is the service region of West Kendall Baptist Hospital, which is the backbone organization. And when there aren't a lot of distinguishing boundaries, that was one that just made very good sense for them. So moving on, how to get started. These are kind of the very fundamental things that you want to think about when you're thinking if your community is ready to go on this journey. You do need commitments from members of key sectors of your community. And this is not a checklist, but really think about your own community and ask yourself kind of, who is it that we need on board and who do we need to have involved in this, whether it's formal leaders or informal. And you would look at health, education, business, government, social sector, safety, and more. Or that you have a pre-existing leadership team that represents sectors and generations. This could be regional collaboratives or pre-existing coalitions. Second is you do need to have an identified backbone organization or multiple organizations that provide the ongoing support required to sustain the effort and serve as a key contact. And the main role of this organization is to be a trusted entity in the community that's perceived as neutral, that can help facilitate and drive this work, provide administrative support, financial support for the collaborative, or help coordinate all of these things, right? So it doesn't have to be that they do all of them, but you need someone who's willing to take that lead and make sure that if you will, the trains are running on time, that administrative work and the work of this is getting done. It's important that you understand that this is a time commitment. We all have day jobs, we're all very busy people, and we are committed to improving our community, but this does take time. Also, we're looking for a willingness to look beyond sectors and silos, beyond projects and activities, to truly looking at how the system works together. And then finally, recognizing that this isn't just a project, this is a forever journey, and hopefully this becomes the culture, as we said earlier, of how things are done in your community, that it's sustainable. So this is just a quick list of how the key offerings of how we support you in the National Learning Collaborative. Every October, we have a kickoff conference. We partner with the Baldrige Alliance in their Baldrige Fall Conference. We also have twice monthly online sessions in year one, and this is really where the teaching and support happens. We have presentations, sometimes we have assignments. We're helping you to build your profile, strengthen your leadership, agree on your priorities. These are for 1 hour each. We also provide expert reviews and feedback, so help make sure kind of you're continuously improving, sort of instill that culture as well early on. We provide each community with a mentor that's available 1 hour a month to help you sort of give specific tailored assistance. And then like Baldrige, we have an assessment and recognition program that provides feedback on your work. And application fees for that program are included in your Learning Collaborative yearly fees. So the cost of participation in year 1 is $25,000. In year 2, it goes down to $15,000, and year 3 goes down to $15,000, because we really want to make sure that you are in this journey for the long haul. These are the key dates at a glance of kind of how it works. Essentially, from the moment that you provide the application fee, we set up an initial assessment video conference, and then we help sort of discuss and set goals for you to make sure that you're prepared. And so that happens basically whenever you submit. There's no kind of, requirement of a certain date for that. So I guess I would say the earlier the better. We accept up to 6 communities per year. Because you all learn together, and we want to keep the numbers small so that we're able to have a lot of conversation and discussion time and sharing time. The sessions are currently scheduled at the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month. And then this is the kickoff conference, which is going to take place in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, which is where Kim is from and one of our first communities. This is a list of the participating communities so far. We've had 4 cohorts already, so 4 years. So this will be our 5th year doing this. Cohorts range from 4 to 6 communities. And as you can see, they're from all over the country. They're small, they're urban, they're rural. It's a wonderful, diverse spread of communities. And what I love about it too is that there's a lot of value in learning from each of these. Everyone has different perspectives. But there's a lot of things that we share too and can learn from each other. So that's where I get to kind of leave this and turn this over to our 3 community leaders to talk. If you guys wouldn't mind, are there any questions that I should answer now that we should talk about now, or should we go into the spotlight and then get to them? Any thoughts?
I'm just skimming through the questions one more time. I think that we can take all of the questions at the end. I think that will work.
Okay. And I would just, maybe if you see an opportunity to answer them in your presentations, then that will help as well. So thank you so far for listening. And now it's my pleasure to let each of our panelists kind of speak for a few minutes about their own experiences, and then we'll have questions. So first up is Manuel Castaneda. So thank you, Manuel.
Thanks, Stephanie. Again, my name is Manuel Castaneda. I'm part of the San Diego South Region community. I work for the Backbone organization, the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency. And we support the Live Well San Diego leadership team there in the South Region. And this is a community excellence group, like I mentioned before, that has successfully been working together for the last 10 years. And they've been working towards the vision, as you see on the slide there, of a region that is healthy, safe, and thriving. You can also see from the slide our Live Well pyramid. That's our approach, right, to community development and community improvement. That is rooted really in Baldrige principles, right? We value setting a common agenda, having a community systems perspective. We invite everyone to the table that has different views of that system or different perspectives of that system. We manage by fact. We have community indicators, as you see there, that measure the effectiveness of our actions, and we work towards improving outcomes in the community through collective action. So as a community, as a backbone organization that values the Baldrige framework, when we became aware of the Communities Excellence 2026 framework, we immediately saw the value of it. We recognized that the Baldrige framework helps organizations become the best, right? This Baldrige-based framework can help our community. We recognize that it can help our community become the best of the best, which is what our residents deserve, right? That's how we felt. And doing the best we possibly can to address the challenges and needs in our community, this framework will help us do that, and our residents deserve that. And we need that structure and that thoroughness to be able to address the complex issues that plague our communities. So we needed this framework that has been proven and that focuses on results. In San Diego, we always say that together we can do more than each of us can do alone. And we truly live by that statement. So how much more powerful would it be if we could embark on this journey together with other communities that recognize the value of this framework? So we also joined the National Learning Collaborative, and there's many benefits that we recognized. When we embarked on this journey together with the other communities, we saw that many of us have the same issues in our community, the same needs. We might be communities of different sizes and different parts of the country, but many of the problems are the same. So we benefit from working together and sharing our approaches and promising practices. We have the ability there to ask questions and clarification from national experts, Baldrige experts, and community practitioners that are doing their best to apply this framework in their community. It's great being a part of a community of communities where we can do this. Like Stephanie mentioned also, we get a feedback report, and that is so valuable to us, where we document everything that we're doing, our processes, our attempts to answer these questions and thread them into the work that we currently do. And then we present it to these experts that give us feedback, right? And give us our strengths and our opportunities for improvement, our OFIs. That has been valuable for us. And we create a yearly action plan based on that feedback report. So those are some of the highlights and the value that we see in applying this framework and joining the Learning Collaborative. Thank you, Stephanie, for allowing me to share a little bit about our community.
Thank you. All right, let's move. Actually, there was one question I saw specifically for you, Manuel. I think it was something about there was a lot of partners. How do you manage this with so many partners? So I don't know if you're willing to talk a little bit about the approach of the leadership teams and the committees.
Yeah, great question. So, we celebrated 10 years in 2020. We've been doing this for 10 years. In our region, we have 500 LiveWell partners. In San Diego South region, in our community, we have upwards about 50, 60 recognized partners and other collaborators, almost 100 in total. And it was done very deliberately and one partner at a time. And as you work and you partner with organizations and you see results, right, and you share those results in the community, it attracts attention, right? Other people will recognize, wow, we can truly achieve more if we work together, if we approach community through a systems perspective. And I think that's truly what has happened in our community, that a lot of organizations have reached out to us and say, hey, we'd love to partner. So we've been very deliberate about understanding how to add value to our community in the approaches that we design and in the events and in the programs and services that we design together as a community.
Thank you. All right, so let's go next to, it's going to be a surprise. Oh, Excelsior Springs and Kim.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, I always love talking about Excelsior Springs after Manuel has talked about San Diego, because I feel like as we look at the Learning Collaborative, our communities could not be more opposite. And so I think it's always really fun to hear about how this framework can be applied across a number of different settings and communities. So a little bit about Excelsior Springs. We are a relatively small community. We have about 11,000 within our city limits, or if you look at our zip code or school district, about 17,000 there. We're about 30 miles outside of Kansas City, Missouri. And for the most part, we are a fairly rural community, although with easy access to some of the amenities that get from living near a big city. So we are officially part of the alumni cohort now. We've been all the way through, and this has just been such a fantastic experience for us. So I'm going to tell you a little bit just about how our structure works to hopefully get you thinking about what this could look like in your community. So unlike San Diego, who already had kind of this ongoing community development collaborative happening, this was kind of a brand new endeavor for us. And so we really started from the ground up kind of building. So our journey certainly looks a lot different than that of some other communities. But we, as I indicated earlier, that first year and kind of that assessment piece for us and kind of getting to know our community was really important. What we discovered through that first year and through that journey is that one of the things that was going to be really important for us to focus on as a community is increasing life expectancy in our community. And so we were able to do that, or are starting to work on that, I should say, right? It's a long-term goal by really focusing on 3 social determinants of health that we found were also a priority in our community from our residents. And they are health and wellness, housing, and then economic vitality. And so those are kind of our 3 areas of strategy focus, if you will. And then we have 2 additional task forces or work groups. One of them is data and communications, which really focuses on our messaging out to the community and overall community engagement. And then we have another task force that kind of wears the hat of both focusing on ethical decision making across our task forces and making sure that is at the forefront of every conversation, as well as inclusion in our task forces, and making sure that's a priority. So again, just to kind of reiterate, our first couple of years have really, or our first few years, I should say, have really been focused on capacity building and clarifying that strategy. One of the questions that I've seen in the chat box of kind of benefits during COVID, and for us and for a lot of communities across the learning collaboratives, one of the things that we have heard is that through this effort in our communities, the table was already set for some of these conversations. So one of the things, if you notice with the diagram on the screen now, is that we have got in every one of these areas, we have many sectors represented. So people are having conversations and sitting around a table that they might not normally be sitting at. And that has been one of the real benefits to our community as we've kind of built this, but especially in COVID, those tables were already set for people to have those important cross-sector conversations about our response to COVID as a community. So that's been a real benefit for us. And the other thing I would add too is just the opportunity to learn from other communities and see how other communities are doing this work. So I hope that gives you all some food for thought as you think about what this might look like in your community.
All right, thank you, Kim. And next up is Crystal Golnick, who's going to talk about Northwest Missouri.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. So a couple of things about Northwest Missouri. As I mentioned before, it's an 18-county region. It's primarily rural. You can see by the map here that we do have one sort of metropolitan county in this, and then a few that are a little closer to the Kansas City area. We're just north of where Kim is, actually in Missouri, and have a whole different set of challenges and opportunities probably than both Kim and Manuel have. As we have started this, we really found a value in communities of excellence in multiple ways. One, I'm just going to be honest, is probably ongoing encouragement. So beyond the empowerment that the framework gives you and all of that, it's just the ability to connect with people who are big thinkers and are systems thinkers who have kind of walked this path as well in their own community. And there's great value in finding peers across the country because this is a long journey. Community development, community improvement efforts are more than just economic development. They're more than just health and wellness initiatives. They're more than just focusing on education from birth throughout life. And it's more than just focusing on a couple of key priorities that have to do with quality of life, like broadband or water or electricity or streets or lights on sidewalks, things like that. All of those things are really, really important. What's so incredible about this framework and the entire Baldrige approach is this comprehensive view of how things are interconnected and interdependent, and having a network of people to just help be encouraging along that path is really, really helpful. Some of our communities who have been involved in this process from the beginning, we were also one of the first communities, have been really successful in identifying specific projects that they knew that they needed to run with and be successful with in order to build that community engagement and build that overall financial support. So that Nottoway County that you see in that lighter blue is that case. They very quickly picked up on how things are interconnected. They were able to bring people together in their community who didn't ever talk to each other before. There are all kinds of lines of competition, both seen and unseen, drawn and undrawn. And that has been a real value to them. They've been able to move some serious revitalization efforts forward in their community, which has been great. And they're now starting to engage in the larger regional efforts that we have going. Some of our other communities are much, much smaller. And when we say much, much smaller, we're talking, 2,000 people or so. And so very different situation than Manuel, who probably has 2,001 organization. I don't know, but a lot more people, right? So they're on a little bit of a different path, but the framework is proving to be helpful to them as well, and to us as a region as we try to connect all of these counties together. It just gives us a guide that helps keep us focused and centered as it's really easy to squirrel off, as you can imagine, when you've got lots of people together. The framework provides that opportunity. And it really is, we really, really love that diagram that Stephanie shared before. We've branded it as our own. We've named our entity as the Maximize Northwest Missouri, and kind of put together some graphics to help us communicate what this is all about under the Maximize My Community journey. But it really is about all three parts of our brains. And it's about being able to see and really understand our current story better. That in and of itself is a huge value, that community profile, because it brings sort of this baseline knowledge that sometimes when we are in leadership positions or elected official positions, we just assume everybody knows this information, right? And that is not the case. So having the opportunity to pull all of this different information together is in and of itself a huge value. But then moving to that believing, more of the emotional side of our brain, how we feel about our communities, building that sense of belonging, and being able to really envision what we want our community to look like, not only for ourselves, but for our kids and our grandkids. And so that envisioning a future story is super important. And then here is my favorite part of this, because the framework itself is a set of questions. It doesn't do the work for us per se. That's where our commitment comes in. But it certainly empowers people that when they want to get busy doing, which is, 80% of the population would much rather just get to work doing on a project, right? When we move forward, we're a lot more prepared and we're more strategic about how we do things. And I think that in and of itself, aside from the other things, is of value. So it allows us to do more strategically and bring that knowledge forward in a way that helps really move from that chaos of being really reactive. We might be doing a lot of great things reactively, but it's moving us to being more proactive, more aligned, and ultimately, we hope in the future, really be able to integrate some of our activities a whole lot more to leverage what are very limited resources in our primarily rural region. So I will also say, because I did see a couple of comments and questions regarding COVID-19 and how has this been helpful? And I would have to say, one, I have heard through our network in Communities of Excellence that for those who already had an organization together, whether they formed before this or because of their involvement in Communities of Excellence, their connectivity to each other and that trusting relationship helped them move to serve their community during COVID-19 so much faster than if they had not been. And if not faster, certainly much more strategic and more effectively. So I will say that in our case, in our region here that you're seeing on the screen, it's a little different because, you know, we're just a little bit further behind. I don't want to say behind, but we're slower at this because we've got a lot of geography to cover. But what it did for us, quite frankly, was it proved that we could do a whole lot without having to be face to face. And I think that was a really great lesson for us because we were able to gather a lot of people together over the past year. 2020, we had, you know, a good 200 people on the line at different times, just talking about the region, our opportunities, our challenges, what we'd like to see as we move forward. And we've been able to connect and develop some other teams who are willing to meet on a weekly basis because they don't have to drive across the region. They don't even have to drive across town, right? They can just hop online and connect. And so that opportunity to connect and really start to draw those lines and help people network has been a huge benefit to this. Had we not had our involvement in communities of excellence, we would never have established those connections during COVID-19. So we're very thankful for that. We've actually moved forward much faster, I think, than we were moving because of it. So.
All right, thank you so much to all three of you. Really appreciate your time and your willingness to share. So what I'd like to do now is just try to get through as many of these questions as we can. I've been kind of scanning them. So just very quickly, I see a question from Jeremy Lee, and he asks, how many communities have participated formally thus far? Is there a particular type of organization that typically takes the lead? So to date, we've had 21 communities involved. And so historically, when we first started out, we saw a lot of the initiation coming from the healthcare sector. I think part of that is a strong presence in Baldrige organizationally for healthcare organizations using the Baldrige framework. But I think also, you know, understanding the work in social determinants of health and their IRS 990 requirements, it was just a really natural connection to continue to the Communities of Excellence framework. However, with that said, we have backbone organizations or organizations that have taken this work on behalf of the community from, for instance, Excelsior Springs. It's the city of Excelsior Springs. In Northwest Missouri, it's the Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri. We have a university. We actually have the Delaware Division of Libraries as serves in this role. So there's no single organization or entity that's more better equipped. I think it's kind of about what your capacity is, how your role in the community. Are you trusted? Are you perceived as neutral? Are you going to be an organization that the community will look to and sort of trust to take this role on? That would be my 2 cents in it. So I'd like to put this next question to our panel. It's from Hillary Claiborne, and she asks, do you have to have your group together when applying, or do you build it as the initial year goes? I thought you all might have some kind of ideas on that.
Yes, I think it's both.
Me too.
Either one can work.
It's exactly what I was going to.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you need to have at minimum some commitments. That's why in our one of my earlier slides, I say you don't have to have your full group together, but you do need some commitments from key leaders or just key individuals or key organizations that are going to help you. And there's different ways that people are engaged. And that's really important for us to understand and then also to recognize and acknowledge. But you do need to have kind of enough interest and enough sort of verbal commitment and willingness to participate that you know that you're going to have the capacity to do this and that you know that you're going to be able to set down on this path and have the people involved that you need. I see some head nods.
I might also just add really quickly that we have learned anyway in our area that it's really, really helpful when you definitely have to have a few people who are passionate about this, but you don't have to be in a formal organization at the beginning. You just have to be moving that direction. And it's super key. Whoever is responsible for helping to fund your initiative, because it runs on a whole lot of volunteerism, but at the end of the day, there does need to be some funding behind that backbone activity and communications work that you're going to need to invest in for community engagement. Keeping them in the loop and helping them feel like their concerns are being addressed through this effort. I think I saw another question in there, something about the UN 17 sustainability goals. Our answer to that is that, quite frankly, because this is full community, absolutely all of those goals are included in this effort, and each community has the opportunity to sort through whatever their priorities are and are really important for their community. So whoever's funding you definitely needs to be roped in as often as possible.
Great, and thank you for answering that next question too. Appreciate that. Okay, let's keep moving. Any tips on getting people on board with this collaborative effort and sustaining the effort?
So this is Manuel. You know, when I look at San Diego's approach, I think it's really interesting how they used a metric to begin this effort. It was a startling metric that showed how some behaviors can lead to diseases, preventable diseases, that account for more than 50% of the deaths in our community. And we had a vision, and we had that metric. And we went knocking on people's doors, essentially, with that, right? We spoke to community leaders, faith-based community, elected leaders, and just said, hey, can we do something about it together? Can we encourage people to address these behaviors or change their behaviors? Because it could save their life. And essentially, that's what we did. And that proved very effective for us. It established partnerships. You know, we started working with people we had never worked before. We created a common agenda, and we developed simple approaches that made a difference, you know, and we've been able to improve our life expectancy in our region because of that.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Continuing on, I'm keeping an eye on the time too. Maybe let's just do one more question. And by the way, we do have on our website, if you go to Learning Collaborative, there's some information on this. There's also a COVID page, and I had collected a series of testimonials that I think are really powerful too, that help you kind of understand the benefits. When is the deadline to be considered one of the 6? We're basically going to accept communities until we reach 6. Typically, I mean, that doesn't usually fill up until, I would say, July 31st is the absolute last date that we won't take communities anymore. But I would encourage you to at least reach out to me now and apply when you do feel like you're ready, as soon as you are. This is for Kim, starting from the ground up, any key learnings about what you would have changed in starting if you had to do it again? Oh, did you answer that one? I'm sorry.
I did. I responded to that in the chat box, and I'm happy to take any follow-up questions now or offline later.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, you know what then, with just 2 minutes to go, why don't I just want to see before we, if you have any closing comments or anything else to just sort of help us wrap up, Manuel, Kim, or Crystal, anything you feel like I haven't said or we've missed here for everybody?
This is Manuel. I just want to, you said this, Stephanie, I just wanted to emphasize it, how this is not like a new program you're adding to, you know, whatever you're already doing. It's really questions just to ask yourself, to understand your current state and figure out, how do you improve? How do you just continually improve? It's almost like you're auditing yourself, right? And that's what I appreciate about it. You know, it's not prescriptive. This framework is not telling you what to do, but it's very important questions, so you can be as systematic and thorough in your approach to community work.
Thank you. All right, well, that is a wonderful way to end this. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Manuel and Kim and Crystal. Really appreciate you joining us here today. My contact information is here any of the questions that we didn't get to, I will see if I can kind of address in a follow-up email, but I would encourage you also just to reach out to me. You can call or email, and I can certainly help answer anything we didn't get to today. So look for an email tomorrow with the recording and the PowerPoint, and I very much hope to hear from you all. And thank you for just continuing to follow our organization and stay interested. And we will hopefully see you all soon. So thanks, everybody.